Wake up, South Africa. You are listening to The Coffee Conversation. My name is Dean Haystack. I'm just a guy who gives a damn. Episode 13, Apiwe.
This is Apiwe, as you said.
Have a sip of your coffee.
Yeah. We're at the end, Dean.
Yeah, I want to come out straight, ask you a question. What positive message have you got for the black people in order to make their lives different here in South Africa in the midst of what we're going through?
Whoa. In the midst of what we are going through. I would say, the elements will always be there. Life will always have its realities. Life will always have its realities. It's like the sea, right? Sometimes there's a storm, sometimes it's calm. It's the boat you sail with. It's the boat you sail with that determines whether you're going to make it to the other side or not. Don't blame systems more than you put energy into becoming somebody that you want to be. If you constantly look at the game and say the game is rigged, you will never find any reason to strive for anything better. You will always blame. Just because there are those realities that serves as blockages and stumbling blocks, that doesn't mean you should stop trying. That's what I would tell black people. That's what I would send out there as the message.
How do you think the black person, you had a conversation in one of the previous episodes where there's a black consciousness that exists. Now, that black consciousness exists for a reason, but elements of it is holding potentially the black people back. How do black people, colored people, Indian people, non-white people, previously disadvantaged people in South Africa?
I want you to be specific then. What black consciousness holds?
The one that mentioned that there's a sense of inferiority, which is not necessarily the actual reality as an individual, but certainly as it displays in society. A lot of the black people feel inferior, like a child that's being beaten, like a child that's been abused, will naturally feel inferior even when the beatings stop, even when it stops. And there's an element of black consciousness that was mentioned that it's natural for people to feel that way because they've been oppressed. How would a black person, what can you tell a black person to encourage them to try and break through that where it's possible?
The feeling will always be there. The feeling will always be there, especially for those of us who are alive now. Maybe it will change in the future, but the feeling will always be there. But you have to find something, like I said, within yourself, a drive, determination. You gotta use what you know against what you feel.
Okay, what did you do? You've broken some of those barriers, some of those mindsets yourself as an individual. Can you give some light on that? You don't think in the bubble of the oppression that you've come from only. You have broken some of those boundaries. As I've had to break some of the structural boundaries of my original existence as a white person in South Africa. If I don't break my boundaries, I'm never going to get through to yours. If you don't break yours, you're never going to get through to mine.
I will resist the temptation there to take all of that glory. I will say I have broken some. I would say I've broken some as the beginning, because some of this internalized inferiority, this internalized oppressive state, is still manifest at certain times. It still manifests at certain times, but I'll tell you the practical things that I think I've done to sort of make headways out is, you have what is known as the township, where black people live predominantly, the ghetto, and then you have suburbs. You have suburbs where white people live, and with those structures in place, there are institutions, there are companies, there is a setup there. In Thembalethu, the restaurant is different than up in town, in downtown. And so I'll tell you a story. There was a time when I thought Wimpy's, McDonald's, and other restaurants was something designed for white people I should stay away from. I could not even buy a takeaway there because all I could see was white people going there. And you could even come to some privately owned restaurants that are in towns. I see white people sitting down, I would be intimidated to even look in that direction. So what I began doing was to force myself to go into those spaces. Sometimes I would be the only one. Sometimes I wouldn't even afford the cup of coffee that everybody comes here for. I'll just ask for water and sit there and make myself to sit there. And with that, I sort of reversed what was in motion, a little bit of that. I cannot claim to say I've absolutely abolished that and kicked all of that down, but I've started something. And that has enabled me to have conversations and get to know people.
Are you seeing a different world?
I am seeing a different world, especially on a personal level, because now my interest is changing. My interest is changing, or my interest rather has changed, in that I'm no longer at a place where I'm like, let them go their way, I'll go my way, as many other people of color have concluded.
I think it's incredibly important what you're saying. I can relate to a similar kind of story of being intimidated. So growing up in Johannesburg, the rich families used to go to holiday in Plet. Us as the poorer families, we would go to KwaZulu-Natal, down to the South Coast, whatever it might be. And all of the friends that I knew who had a lot more money than what we had, they would go to Plettenberg Bay as a holiday place. So when my very first time that I drove the garden route, I skipped Plet. I felt intimidated to go into Plet because it was a rich world that I never knew. When I went to the Lost City in Sun City, I was scared to go to the Lost City. I was quite happy to stay in the normal, what I was used to, what the world was. But one day I went to the Lost City, and it was very, very intimidating. And one day I went to Plet, and going in was very, very intimidating. But when I went into the world, I went, hey, there's a franchise. I don't want to mention names. There's a franchise, and they've got the same price in Plet as they have in Joburg or in George or wherever. And there's that. And I found that it was actually a world that was accessible, even though I was intimidated. But I had to see the world. So I think what you're saying is a massive key, perhaps, for encouragement for any black person, non-white person who was from the previously disadvantaged, is that experiment to find that world, even if it is walking into a coffee shop or into a Wimpy or into a McDonald's that you haven't done before.
You said you're not going to mention names.
Yeah, you're right. But I did. I mentioned names. No, but I mean, I didn't. I went to Plet and I saw a specific one, and okay, it's different. Don't catch me out. So, but what I'm saying is, it's to see that there is a different world. And one of the things that was mentioned before is that as a white South African, the ladies who were living in that one res, let's say, didn't see the world of the black people living in the gat. We don't see each other's world. As white South Africans, we don't realize that 70 or 60% of South Africa have no idea that our world even exists. And that, I think, is creating a disconnect. So the encouragement is, let's try and see each other's world, knowing that they exist.
You know, now, when I talk as we move with this work that we are doing, even with these conversations, we often find that white people are generally not interested in the conversation about race. They even will, like, I don't need it. I'm gone past that. It's like, when you're done, call me. You can miss me. So what would be your encouragement? What do you see anything wrong with that? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've noticed it. I mentioned it to you earlier that a lot of the people that I send the clips out to and the episodes to, not a lot, one or two of them have come, and I understand it. They've come and they said, listen, when you get off the racial issue, send me more, because I'm tired of the racial issue. I'm tired of the racial debate. And when I mentioned that to you, you said, well, that's a privilege to be able to do that. Well, the fact that we can, as white people, actually go, I don't want to deal with the racial issue, it's because we can still partly look after ourselves. The major danger is that world is falling apart, even for white people. That world is falling apart even for white people. White people don't see it yet, but the ability to self-determine and look after ourselves is falling away. Is it going to take, and this is my question to the white people to encourage, is it going to take our financial world falling apart before we start noticing the injustices? Because then maybe it's too late. We don't realize that the answers and the solutions for the country don't lie with the government. I've said it before that a bad government can destroy a country, but a good government can't save it. It's the industry and the civilians and the people that actually make the country work. The government merely is supposed to create a platform for that to function optimally.
Just a second there. What should be the right motivation? What should be the motivation that motivates white people to be interested in the conversation of reconciliation, or be it whatever it is.
Get your head out your butt. Realize that it's about the children and the grandchildren that have to live in a country that we are now forming, and we're doing it really, really badly as those that have privilege, those that have industry, those that have opportunity to actually affect real transformation in this country for all the people of South Africa. It not being done properly, we're going to die, but our kids are going to be left behind. That's a motivation to me. I mean, I don't know about the people suffering in Taiwan. I don't care about them. I don't know about the people who are suffering in Thembalethu, but for me to not care about them affects my future. Now, maybe that's a selfish motivation, but at least it's a start, damn it, because for the last 26 years, the whites have disengaged primarily. And there's many, many reasons for it. And in the moment, we're in a massive, massive crisis. But in a massive crisis is the greatest opportunity at the same time. If we can say to the people who are captains of industry, captains of retail, captains of business and stuff that's happening in South Africa, forget about BEE, that it's imposed in a way that we don't want. Do we as South Africans want to see 50 million people, the talent pool, come into the marketplace? Because if we do, the marketplace is going to become one of the most powerful marketplaces in the world. Why do we have to worry about the fact that it's imposed on us to affect BEE? Why don't we just do it in a way that actually makes sense from an industry perspective? And that's the opportunity that lies within industry in South Africa, in retail in South Africa, in marketing in South Africa. Those that have got good companies want good people. There's 4.5 million white people. There's 55 million or 50 million non-white people. We don't have to take the talent pool from 5 million. We can take it from 50 million and let everyone benefit. That's what my encouragement to the white people of South Africa is. I'm a sixth-generation South African. We've been here since the 1800s as the family, Haystack family, and struggled many, many years all the way through to achieve something, and then a lot of things were loaded in our favor. But this is my home. This is the home that I want for my children. This is the home that I want for my children's children. And unless we who have opportunity, authority, influence, competence, access, don't apply willingness to spread the massive resource of South Africa, not by giving handouts, but by giving hand up to those that also have gifts and talents, this country is going to go to ruin, and we might not suffer. Well, we will. We probably will, because it's going to happen pretty quickly. We might get killed anyway. But who wants to see their children die? There's one thing, I'll take the slap across the face, but don't hit my children. But we're the ones who've got to care for them. Unless those in industry, those privileged black and white people now who are in positions of authority, actually engage with the real transformation, and that's a human level issue, the country's going to go to ruin.
You know, the one thing that I'm trying to learn is to ask questions instead of wanting to be asked questions. And so I want to ask you another question, Dean. Do you think, with that in mind, that yes, most white people or some white people are not interested in the conversation, that attitude, while there is a perception that the problems that we have, that we are dealing with now, they brought those problems, that they caused those problems. Now, to be the ones to say, you're talking too much about this, can't we get along? We just want to get on with it. And, you know, that cliche of just wanting to get on with it while you get on with it in your jacuzzi. Do you think white people can be trusted to present solutions that will be good for everybody, that will be good for everybody across the board, all the demographics, with the history? Now, I'm not talking about what you know that white people can do. I'm talking about, do you think that there will ever be a time when you achieve that trust to even be engaged with the expectation that you will do right?
I don't know if it's a trust issue. I think it's an engagement issue as well. You know, the first thing is that I don't think it was only the whites who created the situation that we're in South Africa, especially not since 1994. I don't even think it's the government's fault entirely, because the government was empowered by the people. I think it's all people in South Africa who have created the status quo today. I think that the blacks, the whites, the Indians, the coloreds, the Chinese have all made mistakes in this. The mistakes that the white people have made is that we disengaged because we could. If they engage the country, if they engage the economy, if they engage it as this is our country, move away from the statement that it's not my government, I didn't vote for them. I didn't vote for them, but they are our government. But let's engage on those terms. And let's affect what we all wanted in 1980s, right until 1994, that most of the white people wanted, and that's a free country for all. Re-engage. The ones that can't be trusted are normally the ones right at the top. We're seeing that the same in the black communities now. The ones right at the top are the ones who can't be trusted. The people on the ground are the ones that need to engage. Why are we looking to the ones at the top all the time? The individuals who have companies can do something. They've disengaged, many of them. And if we engage, look for that talent. We need the talent. We just need to be encouraged to do so, and maybe given permission to do so. So I give you all permission to start looking for really talented, gifted, young, male, female, black, Indian, colored people that can help grow your company and make you even wealthier and lift them out as well. That's how we're going to fix the country. Let the whole sea rise, and everybody rises with it.
Those who have the boats to sail.
Yeah.
Because not everybody will rise. Some of that will sink in it. Some will sink in it. Only those who have boats that are seaworthy and even prepared to sail will be able to this is the crux really. I'm not even sure what can be done. I'm not even sure what can be done, because this notion that the rising tide will lift all the boats, that sounds good, right? But not always. It's not always the case, because the marketplace became different in South Africa after 1994. I think opportunities became more, but you still have this, that most companies, I think we mentioned this in earlier episodes, that most companies of white people today were established after 1994. And those that existed, they even became more wealthier after 1994. So the rising tide did not necessarily lift everybody in the township. And so I'm not blaming you for that. I'm not saying it's the fault of white people or anything, but I think I want to propose that we stop being self-absorbed that you don't see others suffering.
Yes.
Stop being so self-absorbed that you don't even consider engaging somebody else, even listening to their struggle, what they have to say. As much as it shouldn't be them that talks all the time, but there is a problem. There is a problem, is that you have admitted multiple times that white people stood back and be like, okay, that's not our government. That's not our government. I didn't vote you. I didn't vote you in. And then black people always blame the apartheid. And we take those as personal attacks when those statements are mentioned. Yeah. When you say apartheid, that is almost synonymous to white people. When you say, it's not my government, you have to understand that that is synonymous to saying, I am not part of the blacks.
Because it's a black government.
Because it's a black government.
Correct.
And that has driven even a larger wedge between us.
Yeah.
That has driven an even a larger wedge between us. And I value what white people can bring on the table, especially in the development of our country. I value that because I know they have the most experience on running things, because they had the most opportunities to run things. So why not now, share that? And that cannot be shared on a satellite basis, You have to come in contact, a proximity.
The question is, how do we share that? And I think it's about realizing that the gifts and the talents are lying dormant. And if we want to share it, it's not about, I don't believe in redistribution of wealth, because then everybody ends up poor. Everybody ends up poor. Guy wins the lotto, 6 months later, all of his money is gone. So if we just give, even most white people, you give them a lot of money, 6 months' time it's gone. If they don't know how to look after it, if they don't know how to manage it, if they don't know how to make that survive, it's gone. Most white people don't know how to deal with it either. There's very, very few people who do. So it's not about redistribution of wealth, but it's about redistribution of opportunity. Not just opportunity, but a hand up, those that are down. You know, blacks do start at a lower. Not because they're stupid, but because they've had a harder start in the first place. As mentioned before, we've got parents who can put us through university and da-da-da-da-da, although some don't. Blacks don't necessarily have that. So it's a hand up to get that started. One of the things you said earlier is that the sea has risen since 1994. It actually hasn't. It's lowered. The economy in South Africa is much smaller than what it used to be, even in the 1980s. And that's part of the problem, is that the economy hasn't grown. There's many, many reasons for that. We can't go there. But for white people to see the world that black people live in and have an understanding, and for black people to see the world that white people live in and have an understanding. White people can engage with black people to give them not a hand out, but a hand up. A start.
Okay, how do you do that in a way that's not degrading? How do you give a hand up without doing that arrogantly? Because in many situations, it's viewed, like I said, as love going to a pet. What's the disconnect there?
I think that
what's the attitude of white people when they help a black person? When they give that,
I can only speak for myself. You know, earlier you said that I've said many times white people did this. I don't want to claim to speak for white people. I can claim for what I know in my life and what I've experienced of some. The attitude of wanting to help is not a bad attitude. And it's not one that needs to come from superiority. I think what we should do as a country in industry is start at the schools, where we know that those people are still learning and trying to find and realize potential, and farm the talent from there. It's easy. It's interest tests, aptitude tests, giving them focus and direction. And then as they put energy in and start performing, pull them out first, because the white kids will find their own way. But those guys won't. But the talent is there. Pull them out first. Bring them into the system responsibly. And start there. We've got an enormous talent pool in South Africa that we are just not farming. And we get a few of them out. And they will start becoming the engineers of new industry, the development of new products, the starters of new companies, expanding the whole economy so that although, let's say, white South Africans occupy 10% or 70% of the economy now, that can go down to 20%, but because the economy has grown by 300%. It's just got much bigger. But if we don't help them realize their potential, which I think we have an obligation to do, and we can step forward and do it, that's not going to happen. We need to.
Well, we will continue with this where we can. This is the end of this episode.
Yeah.
And it's good that we are coming at the end of it with at least some positive, propositions. We have to look at the terms we use. There is so much in this. You know, one man said it's a tree with multiple roots and multiple branches. So it's not a one-dimensional problem or even an issue. So hope we get to continue with this sometime again.
We shall. To quote you, South Africa is a workable dream.
That it is.
My name is Dean Haystack, and I'm just a guy who gives a damn.
This is Apiwe. It's been a plum-pleasing pleasure.